Now, a new fantasy novel, the first in a forthcoming trilogy set in a mythic Africa. Jeffrey Brown brings us the latest entry on the NewsHour bookshelf. It's part of our Canvas, our regular arts and culture series.
In the writer Marlon James's Brooklyn apartment, African masks he's collected over the years. Superhero toys.
So here, your love of comics.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I gobbled up so many comics and graphic novels.
And lots of books, including the comics and fantasy stories he's long loved.
Which is completely true.
The Jamaican-born James is best known for his literary fiction, including A Brief History of 7 Killings, winner of the prestigious Man Booker Award. Now comes Black Leopard, Red Wolf, a tale of magic, shape-shifting characters, bloody battles, and fantastic adventures. Familiar in some ways, but through a less familiar lens.
It's almost like an African Arabian Nights, in that it's a story about stories. What happened? This man is telling you what happened, and he gets very digressive along the way, telling you all other sorts of stories, all other sorts of folk tales. Because if you read stuff like Arabian Nights, a story leads into a story, leads into a story, leads into a story.
I've seen you describe yourself as a fantasy nerd. What does that mean?
It means I read everything. Even my vocabulary of sci-fi cinema, I realized wasn't even cinema. First time I saw Return of the Jedi, I was like, oh my God, I have never seen this. And I know everything about that film.
Yeah.
Because I've read the books, I've read the movie tie-ins, and I read the comics. So even my cinematic language was books. It was reading whatever I could get my hands on. And usually that's stuff like comics, or again, Dragon Slayer, which again was a movie tie-in.
Yeah.
A lot of the crucial books like Lord of the Rings and Dune, I read as an adult. Whatever had words and I could get, I would grab it and read it.
What was it and what is it about the fantasy genre that grabbed you and made you want to write one?
I never took kindly to the idea that you outgrow the magical and the surreal and the fairy tale, and I still don't. And I've always found it weird that that you're supposed to get to the point where you mature beyond Brothers Grimm. I never did that.
You're supposed to grow up, right?
Yeah, I never had that literary puberty, and I don't want it either. And I think because of that, I never let go of that, always wanting that fantastical. So, I mean, I'll watch even bad fantasy films. I don't care. Just give me a sword and some sorcery. I think at some point, though, I did start to react to people like me being not included or erased.
People like you.
Black people, people of color, being erased from those narratives or not even being in them in the first place. And there's a part of me that always wished to see just somebody like me in a story with dragons and elves and so on. There is a thrill, particularly when you're young, to see somebody like yourself in a story. There is. It's something you notice when there's the absence of it.
The stories that went into this book, from African mythology, from history, where did you find it all?
Everywhere, including online. Thank God for the internet.
Yeah.
Old folk tales. I found recently translated epics and history books written now, and recent archaeological finds, sources. And as a novelist who has written historical novels before, that's something that's just part of the work. I mean, I'll read the ship logs, I'll read the tax records. I want to read the original information and inform my own story.
You're clearly playing with language in many different ways. So where does the language come from?
It comes from everywhere. A lot of it is being Jamaican. The thing is, I'm not from the continent. I'm not from an African country. And my literary sensibility is as much shaped by Amos Tutuola as it is by Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to lose that. That's who I am, and that's how I write. At the same time, I'm writing a novel that is trying, at least attempting, to put forward a vision that is not European and is not influenced by European values, not even by a European counting system. So the dilemma is, how do I use this language I know, English, that's what I write in, that's what I speak, but try to come up with something that's very foreign. It has to read, if anything, the novel has to read almost like an English translation.
Yeah.
than English. So, for example, some characters speak only in the present tense, even when they're talking about the past, which is also very Jamaican. All our verbs in Jamaican English stay present tense, regardless of tense. I thought that was just bad English. And fantasy does give me the freedom, the kind of playground to mess with. Not mess with, to play with all of that, but also to be true to the structure of languages.
Did you think much about who this is intended for, who the audience is? I mean, you've mostly had a literary following, I think, right? So is this fantasy for the literary lovers, and what about the fantasy lovers? Will they think it's too literary?
You know what? I still think I write for everybody. I put a lot of trust in the reader. Which is, I'll say, yeah, there are parts where you might feel you're out without a paddle. Don't worry, the current is coming.
Yeah.
So I still think I write for everybody.
You are giving the world a trilogy, right? You think people still have the attention span to read it, stay with it?
My theory is that all those kids who read Harry Potter are grown up now.
Yeah.
So they've already read 900-page novels.
Yeah.
So it's an odyssey. Of course, it's episodic, but also something that has a sort of a thorough line. And if nothing else, they're good battle scenes.
All right, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, Marlon James. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.